Hello, good evening. Welcome to the National Book Critics Circle Awards ceremony at the New School. I'm Luis Jaramillo, the interim director of the School of Writing. Last night we heard from over 20 of the finalists, and I don't know about the rest of you who were here last night, but I felt like I was waking up from a long hibernation. I was very inspired. So tonight is a night for celebrating the finalists and winners, but it's also a night to celebrate the work of the critic. I'd like to thank Lori Muchnick and the rest of the NBCC board and the NBCC members for all of their extraordinary work on behalf of writing and writers. At the New School, I'd like to thank Lori Lynn Turner, Justin Sherwood, Pamela Tillis, Payal Doshi, Karen Callender, and Sylvan Simon. And now we get to move on to the fun part of the evening when writers get awards. I'd like to turn the evening over to Lori Muchnick, the board president of the National Book Critics Circle. Please welcome Lori.
I'm Lori Muchnick, president of the National Book Critics Circle, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our awards ceremony for the publishing year of 2013. We're happy to have you join us this evening as we honor the most outstanding work of the past year in 6 categories: fiction, nonfiction, biography, poetry, autobiography, and criticism. I'd like to extend our gratitude to all the authors who have joined us here tonight, as well as the editors, publishers, agents, and publicists who helped bring their work to our attention. The National Book Critics Circle Awards were founded in 1974 out of a conversation that took place at the Algonquin Hotel by a group of critics who wanted to establish a set of awards given by critics themselves. Unlike other literary awards, the books that would be considered would not have to be submitted by publishers for a fee. They would come directly from the vast pool of books considered by our board members in the course of their work during the year as book editors and critics. In the 38 years since those first awards, the NBCC has grown to include several hundred member critics and book review editors from across the country, and the number of judging categories has jumped from 4 to 6. It has also expanded to include the Nona Balakian Citation for Excellence in Reviewing, which recognizes outstanding review work by an NBCC member, and the Ivan Sandroff Lifetime Achievement Award, given to those individuals and institutions whose work has made a decisive contribution to the world of letters. We're delighted to present the Balakian Citation tonight to Catherine Powers and the Sandroff Award to Rolando Hinojosa Smith. And tonight is an extra special night because for the first time in many years, we've added an award to our stable, the John Leonard Award for a debut book in any genre. John Leonard, as you know, was one of the founding members of the NBCC, a longtime critic and editor and lover of books and writers. We wanted to honor his memory and decided that the best way to do that would be to celebrate a writer just starting out, because John was always eager to champion new writers and also to help new reviewers get started. This award is different from our other book prizes, which are chosen by the 24-member board. In honor of John's democratic spirit, the winner of his prize is chosen by a direct vote of all the approximately 600 members of the NBCC. We're thrilled to have John's wife, Sue Leonard, here tonight, along with 2 of their children, Andrew Leonard and Jen Nessel. Sue will present the inaugural John Leonard Award to Anthony Mara for a constellation of vital phenomena. Tonight's ceremony is the culmination of 12 months of reading, discussions, arguments, counter-arguments, and several intense face-to-face meetings for our board members. At the beginning of each year, we divide up into committees corresponding to the award categories and then start reading as extensively as possible in each of those committees. After we choose our finalists in January, all the board members read every one of the 30 titles. Earlier today, we met in a room on 13th Street and argued our way through each group of finalists. Today, we're proud to name the recipients of the NBCC Awards. I'd like to ask the members of the board to stand up so we can recognize you for your efforts. Several board members are at the ends of their terms this year, and I'd like to take a moment to thank them individually for their work over the past 3 years, or in many cases, much more than that. They are Eric Banks, Benjamin Moser, Elizabeth Taylor, David Yulin, and Marcela Valdez. Eric is our... Eric is our immediate past president, and I would like to thank him especially for answering my frantic emails at all hours of the day or night and always knowing the answer. The NBCC would not exist without the support of the literary community as a whole. We also would not be able to put together our public events without the generosity and support of so many other people and institutions. I'd like to thank New School University, and especially Luis Jaramillo, the interim director of the writing program, and Lori Lynn Turner, the associate director of administration, who always make things run so smoothly. A special thank you as well to the two publicists who have tirelessly donated their time to the NBCC, Lauren Sarand and Sarah Russo. And finally, very special thanks to David Varno up in the sound booth, who helps us in so many ways, and Rigoberto Gonzalez, who stepped in as our vice president for awards in the late fall and made creating this event look easy, which it was not. I invite you to join us to toast all our finalists at our benefit reception immediately following tonight's ceremony. The reception will be held at the Lang Center, a block uptown at 55 West 13th Street on the second floor. Tickets to the reception can be purchased at the door. As I like to remind people, this reception is the only event the NBCC holds all year for which we ask a donation, and we greatly appreciate your support. Additionally, I'd like to note that books by all of our finalists are available for sale outside the door. If the authors who are here can sit outside for a little while and sign books afterwards, we would appreciate it. And now, to introduce Sue Leonard and the John Leonard Prize, I'd like to welcome Carolyn Kellogg of the Los Angeles Times, who chaired the Leonard Prize Committee this year. Thanks.
Hi. It is an honor and an oddity for me to be here for the John Leonard Prize, because while I read him for years and I saw him speak, I never got a chance to meet him. But I think that's what a legacy prize is about, and I think it's important that this prize is for a first book, because it's about connecting the past of the book critic circle with the future of our literary community. So with that, Sue Leonard, will you come up and take care of us?
Okay. A lot to do. Glasses. All right. Yeah. Thank you, Carolyn. And thanks to Lori and the NBCC board for wanting to honor John and for devising this award to do so. To the membership for nominating books and voting for the prize winner. And a special thanks to Carolyn for working so hard and making sure the prize got off to a good start. What could be more appropriate than a prize for a first book named for a man who so often championed the fresh writer, chosen from any genre and named for a man whose tastes were so eclectic and who himself wrote fiction, nonfiction, book, movie, and TV criticism, and once had a sports column. He would have been especially pleased by the democracy of the process. Let me tell you, it has been 42 weeks, 1 day, 9 hours, and 47 minutes since Lori told me about the plan to create a John Leonard Award. Since then, you have chosen a book to celebrate, and I have read that book, or, like my stepson Andrew, devoured Anthony Marr's book. I want to say a few words about a constellation of vital phenomena, but first I want to talk about the man I loved. Picture this. John sits at the end of the couch, book in hand, TV on, grapes or potato chips, and a glass of diet tonic water with lots of ice nearby, multitasking yet concentrating intensely on the book. He was a marker up of books with pen or pencil, he wasn't choosy, and a bender down of pages. To try to read a book he had tackled meant puzzling out his intentions. The only thing that was clear was that he was wholly engaged in the narrative, respecting the author's intentions. John was a gossip and a storyteller. There were many stories he had polished to a fare thee well, But the story he told more than any other was his Kobo Abe story. Let me take this opportunity to tell it to you. This is my daughter Jen's version, so please, Jen and Andrew, don't get up and leave the room. On a trip to Japan in 1982, John met the novelist Kobo Abe. Abe had fallen into a deep depression and had writer's block after reading 100 Years of Solitude, certain that he could never hope to write anything as great. Several days later, Gabriel Garcia Marquez was awarded the Nobel Prize, and John, drawing on his limited knowledge of Japanese culture, honor, and harikari, feared the worst. He raced to Abe's house where his wife greeted John at the door and told him that Kobo Abe was happily writing away upstairs. Garcia Marquez has won the Nobel Prize, she explained. Since he is now among the immortals, there is no longer any question of competition. Ed Doctorow has said, it is only when a book is read that it is completed. John was a voracious reader. He completed thousands of books. But as all of you know, there can be one other step, criticism. And John was a generous critic. Virginia Woolf said in her essay on how to read a book, do not dictate to your author, try to become him. Be his fellow worker and accomplice. How often John became that author, that accomplice, and how often he became her as well as him. John, always the enthusiast, invited his readers to enjoy, to think about, to cherish a book, and yes, to buy it. There was nothing John liked better as a critic than discovering a new writer, Toni Morrison, Maxine Hong Kingston, Mary Gordon, Letty Pogrumbin, Garcia Marquez, to name a few. Or finding a second or third book he had missed and writing a career essay as he did for Eduardo Galeano, Richard Powers, Maureen Howard, Michael Chabon. He would have enthused about Anthony Marra. Much in the book made me think of John. He would have savored the lists and their twists, nodded at the anything but judicious sprinkling of semicolons, marked up and starred the wonderful turns of phrase. Listen. The soldiers were all fear and peach fuzz, their bodies androgynous with deprivation. The bookcase tipped, and the book covers opened like wings over an underbelly of white feathers, dirty with ink. I won't spill the opening and closing lines. Trust me, they will take your breath away. But I will say that when Marra tells us a character writes his book with one hand dipping into his infant son's crib, I pictured John, almost 48 years ago, writing for much of the day with his daughter Amy asleep in the crib. A constellation of vital phenomena is bleak with the dailiness of war, occupation, and resistance in Chechnya, evoking a world not just forsaken, but destroyed. There is much about continuity, forward and backward, that gives hope. Marra is obsessed with numbers. Do these numbers anchor his characters and him to reality in the midst of insanity? For instance, 882 cats all named for his mother. I will stop there. Because of this prize, John now belongs to the ages, and Anthony Marra is well and truly launched. Anthony?
Thank you so much, Sue. I can't tell you how much that means to me. And thank you to the National Book Critics Circle membership for this extraordinary honor. I'm humbled to receive a prize that's named after someone whose work I so admire and that so embodies the qualities I search for as a reader and strive to create as a writer. I've spent the past few months really reading nothing but John Leonard's essays, and again and again I was astounded by the
by the depth of his cultural and historical and literary knowledge, by his wit, by his generosity, by the respect and appreciation he has for the power of literature, and his insistence on holding his authors accountable to the highest standard of his or her art. This is my first novel, but I feel like I will spend the rest of my career trying to write the kind of fiction of the complexity and ambition that would have been worthy of his attention. I'd like to thank my agent, Janet Silver, my editor, Lindsay Sagnet, Molly Stern, Maya Mavji, David Drake, Rachel Rokiki, everybody at Crown, and Hogarth and Random House who have gotten behind my strange little book, and my parents and aunts for coming. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Greg Barrios, and it's my pleasure to announce the finalists and the winner of this year's Nona Balakian Citation for Excellence in Reviewing. Each year, the NBCC awards the Balakian to recognize outstanding work by a critic member of this organization. The citation is awarded in honor of Nona Balakian, a founding member of the NBCC. Since 2012, the Balakian citation carries with it a $1,000 cash prize. I'm pleased to announce that I'm the donor of this prize. Perhaps it was that made an added incentive that resulted in the Balakian Selection Committee receiving an overwhelming number of outstanding entries this year. Before I present this year's recipient, I'd like to recognize the 4 runners-up for this award. Ruth Franklin, James Marcus, Roxana Robinson, and Alexandra Swartz, all outstanding critics. Would you give them a round of applause? This year's recipient of the Balakian Citation goes to Catherine A. Powers. Ms. Powers, as you may know, or may not know, has a column on books and writing that ran many years in the Boston Globe, and now appears in the Barnes & Noble's review under the title, A Reading Life. She is also the editor of Suitable Accommodations, an autobiographical story of family life, the letters of J.F. Powers, 1942 to 1963. Ladies and gentlemen, Catherine A. Powers.
I'd like to begin, if I can, I'd like to begin by saying how honored I am by this citation and really thunderstruck. Even though I believed for as long as I can remember that book reviewing was my calling, I didn't actually get a chance to do so until I was over 40 years old. And when all hope of that seemed to have vanished. So I owe some people a lot of thanks, and I'd like to begin with that. Betsy Buffington Bates, who phoned me out of the blue and gave me my start at Boston Magazine. Gail Caldwell, the books editor at the Boston Globe, out of the blue, phoned me and gave me a position there. And her successor, David Mahegan, who gave me my own column. And I thank Jim Mustich of Barnes & Noble Review, who years later saved me and took me into his review, the Barnes & Noble Review, And I'd like to thank Bill Tipper, who edits me there with intelligence and tact. And I'd like to thank Ron Charles of the Washington Post, who gives me an opportunity to review audiobooks there, which are somehow still disparaged in certain quarters. And finally, I'd like to thank the National Book Critics Circle and the committee that voted me this honor. And special thanks to Greg Barrios, who's made this the biggest payday I've had in a very long time. So now I'm expected to make a few pronunciamentos. So here we go. I personally like it that the Nona Balakian citation is for excellence in reviewing, which I take to be slightly different from literary criticism, at least it is for me. Reviewing suggests covering books in a way that whatever else it might do, and it can do plenty, it alerts readers as to whether or not they might be interested in reading the book. Most people who read reviews, not of course that most people do read reviews, do so because they enjoy reading about books and are looking for suggestions of what to read. So here's where I stand on the subject. The reader's interests come first. We must be honest about a book, whether it's a failure or in part a failure. Obviously, it's easier to be honest if it's a complete success. But we have to say what it really is or how it strikes us, and that sounds obvious and even sanctimonious, but it's a little sick-making to put into practice. That is when you start thinking of the author's unhappiness or of that author calling you scum. When my father, who was a writer, read that a reviewer who had been very critical of his work had died, he said, "Well, what did he expect?" So you have to not keep these things in mind. Next off, we should be faithful to the work. Say what it is and not blather on about what it should have been. A corollary to that is we should be fair to the writer. And for me, that means trying not to review books that are simply not my cup of tea. I, for instance, would not be the person to write a review of Tender Buttons or Finnegan's Wake. Individual taste plays a big role in judgment, or, as H.L. Mencken pointed out, correctly as usual, criticism is prejudice made plausible. We all have our individual partialities and biases, that is, our point of view. I believe reviews should show one particular well-read person's engagement with a book and convey how that mind, furnished with past reading, was quickened by the encounter. Not only is this what reading's all about, but it gives readers an idea of if the reviewer is the kind of person whose taste they share and whose judgment they can trust. Too many reviewers, and I'm sure none of them are here, write as if they were announcing the verdict of some association of experts or some cohort of worthies speaking on behalf of the greater good. The reviews I'm referring to have a certain supervisory quality, or, in many instances, a routine one. In the case of novels, simply grinding through the plot, inserting a spoiler, and then turning on the thumbs up, thumbs down function. These reviews could be done by an app, as no doubt they will be in the future. In this future that everybody's so interested in that I'm trying not even to think about. Clarity, economy, personal style, that's what I like to see. And a sense of humor, understated preferably. It is humor, after all, along with art and immorality, that separates human beings from animals, and even from apps, at least for those of us who make that distinction. Well, there you have it. I've complained and I've instructed, and that's all I really have to say, and I'll never have a chance to say it with a microphone in front of so many distinguished people. So thank you very much for the honor in every sense.
Stephen Kellman. It's been my privilege to serve as the chair of the Ivan Sandroff Award Committee. The Ivan Sandroff Award, named for a founding member of the NBCC, honors significant, sustained contributions to American literary culture. Past recipients have included Alfred Kazin, Leslie Fiedler, Pauline Kael, Joyce Carol Oates, Robert Silvers, Sandra Gilbert, and Susan Gubar. This evening, we honor Rolando Hinojosa Smith, who has helped put Mexican-American literature on the cultural map. In Saul Steinberg's New Yorker cover, View of the World from 9th Avenue, the Hudson River is the outer limit of civilization. That is, of course, an oversimplification. Steinberg failed to acknowledge Princeton, New Jersey. But there is also sentient life far beyond even Philadelphia. The lower Rio Grande Valley in South Texas has been Hinojosa Smith's Yoknapatawpha. And in Cloud City Death Trip series, a cycle of 15 novels, he has traced the experience of Mexican Americans throughout the 20th century. His characters inhabit two languages, English and Spanish, as well as a communal space in which the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1848 made them strangers in their own land. Demographers and politicians have started to pay attention to the growing population of Mexican Americans. Discerning readers have long known the work of Oscar Zeta Acosta, Rudolfo Anaya, Gloria Anzaldúa, Lorna Di Cervantes, Sandra Cisneros, Americo Paredes, John Recci, Tomas Rivera, Luis Valdez, and others from a tradition of American literature not always visible from 9th Avenue. It is, however, read and studied in Latin America, Europe, and Asia. Born in 1929, Hinojosa Smith is often referred to as the Dean of Chicano Letters. We honor him this evening not only for his fiction, but also for his essays and translations, as well as his mentorship and inspiration to several generations of writers. Dagoberto Gilb, who will present the Sandroff Award, is one of those writers. Born in Los Angeles in 1950, he is currently writer-in-residence at the University of Houston in Victoria. Gilb is no stranger to these proceedings, as his book Gritos was a finalist for the NBCC Criticism Award in 2003. He is a recipient of a Whiting Writers Award, the Penn Hemingway Award, and a Guggenheim Fellowship, among other honors. His works of fiction include The Magic of Blood, The Last Known Residence of Mickey Acuna, and The Flowers. I'm not sure that Rolando has made it into this room this evening yet, but Dagoberto Gilb will either be presenting or accepting the award in his place.
Leave it to the Chicano to bring the iPad. We're the advanced culture. I hope Rolando shows up. I can take it. Okay. Though I, excuse my voice, though I was born and raised in the city of Los Angeles, where I come from has been very little known or discussed, and very few I knew had the dare to wonder why, or probably more kindly said, the time or the energy to do more than just survive. What I am talking about is the larger ambitions, the intelligence, what is American success. But what I'm especially talking about is recognizing a history and a culture, a story, and above all, an art where all people assert voice, show pride and heritage in time for all time. As I grew Looking for myself, I raged and ravaged the temples, flicking off so much that could be no more mine than my becoming some Parisian dandy. The closest I came to existing then was in the agitprop plays that were at the beginning of what we called the Chicano movement, the actos of the great playwright Luis Valdés and his Teatro Campesino during the Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta days. That was when I had finally learned that book was more than a verb. I wasn't very precocious. As a boy, I sort of consumed the idea was the objects that bounced and were thrown were interesting to me more than the ones that were square and had corners. I was introduced to Rolando Hinojosa by my then girlfriend, who was from Eagle Pass, Texas, and was teaching in the most famous high school in Chicano history, Crystal City High, where she checked out a book from its library and then gave it to me, then living in El Paso, Texas. She stole it, in other words. That book, this book, Estampas del Valle, set in the Rio Grande Valley, was my book, was my story. Because we come from an American region and culture of little to no importance in America. We are stereotyped and caricatured. We are pawns. We are unimportant, lesser, marginal, and thus patronized, dismissed, ignored. We are given cliches as glaring as gap teeth accents in bandidos, as Chihuahuas selling chain food tacos. We belong to a small press market, the Southwest. Well, let me step. There are 4 regions in the U.S., 4 quadrants. And if you think of the South, the Southeast region, you know that it's black and white. But the Southwest, you would naturally assume, is brown and white, and yet it is blank and white. Now double down on that. We're in a high period for pedigreed elites, for those who are not just, of course, the best, but they're the only. And yet, here I am, right here now, in New York, no less, filling in that blank. A first. And of course, it's Don Rolando, who has published loyally with Arte Público Press for 40 years. Why was this book important to me, this book from the Rio Grande Valley? Why is Rolando so important to so many of us who couldn't even know ourselves that we were here on land that has been our homeland for as long and longer than this United States? Rolando tells the common stories of us, not the us of those predictable cliches and stereotypes, those Taco Bells and enchilada plates, or that us that is expected as us from the rulers who decide those things for us, but of bankers and secretaries, sheriffs and salesmen, and store clerks, towns that have cemeteries full of unique, rich family history. And he does it in a language that's ours, in either flawless Spanish or what the grandkids make of it, in broken English, and one as elegant as his. He tells of us, that blank region, he honors and celebrates our births and deaths, and the daily life in between, the people's names and the work they have done and the full lives they have led, right there on the region of land as its history. Not just a story of where we once came from, but where we have been and still are. Rolando Hinojosa allowed me to understand that I could write about the ignored and the unimportant and dismissed. I could write from the experience of common life that I knew about those who I knew. His long career, so distant to what is discussed in New York lit parties and creative writing seminars, has shown me that one can write as a writer about people ignored and little regarded for so many years by the mainstream. As though he were my father, I cannot tell you with pride I feel to be here introducing, congratulating, and above all thanking Don Rolando Hinojosa as the National Book Critics Circle honors him so deservedly for a lifetime of great work. Thank you all so much for this, and thank you, Dr. Rolando.
Good evening. Am I supposed to be on? I imagine. Thank you. To be the recipient of this honor and award means the world to me. And what you're looking at here, ladies and gentlemen, is a very lucky man. My grandmother, Martha Phillips Smith, was a teacher. And my mother, Carrie Smith de Hinojosa, was also a teacher. And of the five of us, four of us went into the teaching profession as well. And I was happened to be born in a very small town where everybody knew what you were up to at all times. It was almost like a police state. But that happens. Mine is a very brief speech or talk, but it's heartfelt. Because to receive this award means the culmination of one's life work, recognized by men and women who know what they're doing about their job. And you're looking at a very lucky man. Of the five of us, four of us went into teaching. Two in the grades and two of us at the universities and college levels. Okay. I'm not used to speaking extemporaneously. I even type my notes and I hand them out to my classes so that they don't have to put up with my uhs and ahs and everything else that accompanies my halting speech. But I want to thank some people. First of all, I want to thank Dagoberto for volunteering to introduce me to you. I also want to thank the founder and the director of Arte Público Press, who's with us tonight, Professor Nicolas Canelos, who he and I go back to 1972. And of course, to Steve Kellman, who called me from San Antonio to give me the good news. And he gave me a lot of information, which I wrote down. And in my excitement, I had no idea what it was that I had written down, and I would like to apologize to him if he gave me some sound advice, but which I couldn't read for the life of me. At the point of a gun, really. And this is one of my favorite towns. My daughter, who was here last week in Turkey and waiting for Godot and the cup and a musical and something else, and of course the hockey game, she's a hockey fan. We'll be back here 2 weeks from now. This is one of her four favorite cities, Barcelona, Madrid, and New York, of course, and as always, our hometown where she was born. Thank you very much for everything. This is a very short speech because I'm not used to this, but it's heartfelt, and I want you all to know how much I appreciate it. To be the culmination of man's work by a group of his peers who recognize what he has done. Thank you very, very much.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Weisspiel. It's been my honor to chair the Poetry Committee, and I am so grateful for the great work that they did. The finalists in poetry include Frank Bedart for Metaphysical Dog, published by Farrar, Straus and Giroux. Lucy Brock-Broido for Stay, Illusion, by Knopf. Denise Duhamel, who published Blowout with the University of Pittsburgh Press. Bob Hickok for his book Elegy Ode by the Copper Canyon Press. And Carmen Jimenez Smith for Milk and Filth, published by University of Arizona Press. The recipient of the NBCC Award in Poetry is Frank Bedart for Metaphysical Dog. While Frank comes up, it's my honor to read the citation. In Metaphysical Dog, Frank Bedart has made a search for unanswerable questions that lead him to sensual, mystical, and daunting answers about self-awareness and self-delusion. What we experience in this fine book is a retracing of the quarrels and the ideas of discovery. He has made a poetry of forensics. Like W.B. Yeats, Frank Bedart's Metaphysical Dog makes brilliant poems and poetry out of his quarrel with himself and with humanity. Please welcome Frank Bedart.
Thank you so much. Every time I'm nominated or a finalist for something and don't win, I keep whatever I had prepared and add a paragraph. So this has just gotten longer and longer. I wish what I just said were a fiction, but unfortunately it's not. Any observer of my life would say that I've never been wise in my erotic choices, but have been extraordinarily lucky in friendships. The first person I must mention is my editor and friend, Jonathan Galassi. John, much before he could professionally do anything about it, got my work, made me feel it was valuable. To have as my editor someone who is a searching, indelible poet in his own right, who has given the English-speaking world revelatory versions of Montale and Leopardi, is huge, a great privilege. Early in my life, Elizabeth Bishop and Robert Lowell gave me the great gift of their friendship. The dilemma they faced at the beginning of their writing life is the same dilemma that every serious poet has faced since: how to add something to the tradition of modernism without betraying it. They were not fundamentally at war with their artistic parents, but something was not yet there that they must discover. This is the tradition that I've hoped to be in. I'd call it neo-modernism, a term I first heard from Robert Pinsky, rather than postmodernism. It doesn't repudiate the essential ambition of the great innovative masters at the beginning of the 20th century. Postmodernism has come too often to be understood as an ironic manner, an embrace of modesty out of despair that there is anything else to be embraced, a disavowal of the possibilities of evoking heartbreak and large vision. I remember a review of Maria Callas's recording of Carmen that suggested that first hearing her voice was shocking, like biting into a lemon. I remember saying to myself that I wanted my poems to startle, to arrest the attention in that way. I thank the judges for choosing what I hope they found to be, in part, like biting into a lemon. No good book reproduces exactly what's valuable in another. I envy the books written by the poetry finalists this year. Each has important virtues that my book lacks. The judges had to compare not one like thing to another, but apples to oranges to grapes to pomegranates to clementines. We all know that at bottom there is no competition. In the real world, rather than the artificial hothouse of a finalist list, there's no need to choose between Donne and George Herbert, between Colette and Faulkner. Each feeds a hunger in us that we first discovered when we first read them. When I was an undergraduate first reading King Lear, I can remember vividly my teacher, Tom Edwards, pointing out that after the great sentence that costs so much to arrive at, that sums up so much of the play's disillusion and pain, the sentence, "Rightness is all," another line follows. The scene ends with this single line, a simple phrase said by Gloucester, quote, "And that's true too." In other words, the great line that sums up all isn't all. There is no competition between writers because no writer, not even Shakespeare or Dante, says it all. Art is continually saying, "And that's true too." There's no end to is. The best that we as writers can hope for is to become food and to remain food. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Eric Banks. It's been my honor and pleasure to chair the Committee on Criticism for the past year for the National Book Critics Circle. The 5 finalists in the category of criticism, 5 fantastic books, are Hilton Hall's White Girls, published by McSweeney's; Mary Beard, Confronting the Classics, Traditions, Adventures, and Innovations, published by Liverite; Jonathan Franzen, The Krauss Project, Essays by Carl Krauss, hold on, translated and annotated by Jonathan Franzen with Paul Ryder and Daniel Kelman, published by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. Janet Malcolm, 41 False Starts, Essays on Artists and Writers, also published by FSG. Franco Moretti, Distant Reading, published by Verso. And the recipient this year for the National Book Critics Circle Award in Criticism is Franco Moretti for Distant Reading. If you'll allow me, it is in the meaning and execution that a critic is to be judged, and in Distant Reading, Franco Moretti ruminates on and provides compelling cultural and historical analyses for data he gathers about literature. His methods for gathering evidence may seem counterintuitive, even scientific to a degree, but Moretti values the rhetorical, readerly purpose of criticism. His essays are fluid and pedagogical. He takes us by the hand and walks us through his ideas, and while still scholarly, his conclusions are light on declamations and heavy on a sort of wide-eyed excitement and curiosity. Asking big questions and eschewing overly technical prose, Franco Moretti is one of our most accomplished, provocative, and accessible scholar critics. It's my pleasure to welcome Franco Moretti.
Thank you so much. I thought this was just not going to happen, so I haven't prepared anything. But I will try to say something. This is a collection of essays. They've come out of a triangle. One corner of the triangle is a journal called New Left Review, published in London, which has for many, many years been the journal where I prefer to publish. The title, many of you will know it, the title says says it all, really. And so that's one source of inspiration and also a sort of superego for what I write. The other, another corner of the triangle are my students, and especially my grad students, first year at Columbia, now at Stanford. And especially at this point, a small group of students with whom I've founded and work at a small research unit that we call the Literary Lab, where indeed we try to apply all sorts of quantitative and computational techniques to the analysis of literature. The third side of the corner of the triangle are my wife and my kid. I keep their names to myself. They are the, certainly I write for them too. As I'm sure you've now figured out, I'm not a native speaker of English. Writing in English, all these essays were written in English except the first, has proved a great challenge because I think it happens to many people who write in a second language. You're deprived of nuance, and which I like. I like nuance, but when they are taken away, then you only have one strategy, which is clarity. And so that has forced me to clarity, and eventually clarity has induced me to like more and more methodologies that force you to be clear, and you're either clear or nothing. None of this really is a way of explaining why I should be here instead of any of the other four. I'm just incredibly grateful. Thanks.
Hi, I'm David Hewlin. It's been my privilege this year to chair the Autobiography Committee, and I'd like to thank that committee for coming up with this slate of really superb books. The finalists in the category of autobiography for the National Book Critics Circle Award are Wave by Sonali Dharani Yagala, published by Alfred A. Knopf; The Book of My Lives by Alexander Heman, published by Farrar, Straus and Giroux; The Faraway Nearby by Rebecca Solnit, published by Viking; Men We Reaped by Jesmyn Ward, published by Bloomsbury; and Farewell Fred Voodoo, A Letter from Haiti by Amy Wilentz, published by Simon & Schuster. And the recipient of this year's NBCC Award in Autobiography is Farewell Fred Voodoo by Amy Wilentz. Farewell Fred Voodoo is Amy Wilentz's attempt to understand Haiti's confounding relationship to the rest of the world in the wake of the 2010 earthquake. Fred Voodoo is the voluble Haitian man or woman in the street, good for a quote, an anecdote, and otherness. Wilentz, a professor of journalism with long experience in Haiti, turns her notebook around to interrogate predatory reporting and the many unintended consequences of international aid. She writes of Sean Penn, not unsympathetically, asking, what is an American actor doing running a refugee camp? And what is it about Penn and Haiti that allowed such a thing to happen? Farewell Fred Voodoo is a surprising, disturbing, and revelatory look at a relationship and into the mirror. Congratulations to Amy Wilentz.
Okay, as you can all see, I brought this up. This is the program tonight because I really didn't think I could possibly win this. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it seemed to me it wasn't quite an autobiography, so. But it is the story of my engagement in Haiti, and in that way it is the story of a really big part of my life. And I was thinking as I was sitting there, what if I win? I have to think of something to say. And so I wanted to thank some people, but I don't know how to thank a whole country. I don't know if it's ever been done before, but I'm just gonna say thanks to Haiti. Because that's really, you know, I feel my muse. I don't know why. I try to explain it in the book. It's incomprehensible to me. But I'm so grateful to that place for existing and continuing to kind of pique my curiosity and keep me involved and passionate as a journalist. I want to thank a few individual people as well. I want to thank my agent, Flip Brophy. I want to thank my longtime editor at Simon & Schuster, Alice Mayhew, who really did, at the beginning of my career, which was my first book on Haiti, pick me up out of essentially a trash bin, as she will remember, at the publishing house. Pick me up and pull me out, and she let me write all these years, and not on the bestseller list, let's put it that way. And I wanted to thank, of course, the judges for this award and the National Book Critics Circle itself. Thank you so much.
Hello. I'm Karen Long. I am substituting for Ben Moser, the chair of biography, and the testament to his good work is the fabulous books you're looking at in our finalist lists. They are Scott Anderson's Lawrence in Arabia, War, Deceit, Imperial Folly, and the Making of the Modern Middle East from Doubleday. Leo Damrosch, Jonathan Swift, His Life and His World, Yale University Press. John Eliot Garner's Bach, Music in the Castle of Heaven from Knopf. Linda Lavelle's Holding On Upside Down, The Life and Work of Marianne Moore, Farrar, Straus and Giroux. And Mark Thompson's Birth Certificate, The Story of Danilo Quiche from Cornell University Press. And the recipient of this year's National Book Critics Circle Award in Biography is Leo Damrosch's Jonathan Swift. Born at the end of the 17th century, Jonathan Swift was the most original and influential polemicist in British history. Yet the documentary record for most of Swift's life is scant. Nothing is certain about his early years, Leo Damrosch observes, including the date of his birth. Damrosch's tolerance for mystery is one of the many outstanding features of this spellbinding biography, where others have filled the gaps with unsupported suppositions. Damrosch consistently surveys the available evidence and recognizes its limits. And yet, he is a time traveler and gives us a world centuries old where Jonathan Swift could matriculate through Cambridge University and not know his times tables. At the end of Swift's life, his brilliant mind guttered with dementia. But his intelligence and passion still burn hot in Damrosch's exceptional book. Congratulations.
Well, I'm afraid I joined the parade of people who didn't prepare anything because I didn't expect to say anything. I'm bowled over by this award, I truly am. For many years, I wrote academic books for other academic specialists, and there's gratification in that. But it was jumping off a cliff to actually think some years ago, perhaps I could write for more people than just a few. And I thank first Tina Bennett, my wonderful agent who took me on when there was no evidence that I could be that kind of writer. And I absolutely have to thank Jennifer Banks, my wonderful editor at Yale, because this book would not exist if she had not written me literally out of the blue, our never having met, to ask if I might be interested in a biography of Swift, a thing I'd never thought of doing. And she's been
creative and intuitive in working with the development of that book ever since. And then finally, though she couldn't be here tonight, my wife, Joyce Van Dyke, who's a wonderful writer and a unsparing but also incredibly generous editor of every page I've ever written. And the book, in all kinds of ways, would not be what it is without what she gave it. And of course, I thank the judges for this wonderful award. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Taylor, and I have been, it's my privilege to chair the nonfiction committee with a great group of judges and an extraordinary set of books this year. They are Kevin Cullen and Shelley Murphy's Whitey Bulger's Most Wanted Gangster and the Man That Brought Him to Justice, Norton. Sherry Fink, 5 Days at Memorial, Life and Death in a Storm-Ravaged Hospital, from Crown. David Finkel, Thank You for Your Service, Sarah Crichton Books, Farrar Straus. George Packer, The Unwinding, An Inner History of the New America, from Farrar Straus. And Lawrence Wright, Going Clear, Scientology, Hollywood, and the Prison of Belief, from Knopf. A wonderful set of books, and the recipient is Sherry Fink. So, who lives, who dies, who decides? These are the questions that animate the extraordinary 5 Days of Memorial. More than 6 years, 500 interviews after Katrina, Sherry Fink reconstructs the choices made during those days of crisis at a hospital in New Orleans. And she brings readers into the high-stress unreality as doctors and nurses decide who will live and who will die. There's ample opportunity for moral outrage here, but Sherry Fink has delivered a big book, something more. It's not a rant, it's a page turner and a book bursting with stories that defy a single narrative. It's a book with big questions about what happens when exhausted and stressed out doctors and nurses are forced to practice triage, when medical resources don't exist, and when surviving may not be living, but who decides? Sherry Fink.
I also didn't think I was gonna win. This book was gonna win. So, wow, thank you. This is amazing. And really one of the central questions of the book was encapsulated by an ethicist who was on a panel discussing these issues. And he said, do exceptional times allow for exceptions to moral rules, or does a time of crisis call for an even deeper commitment to our fundamental moral values? I think that's one of the questions at the heart of 5 Days of Memorial. And like Amy, I will thank New Orleans for this book, and really the people who opened up and spoke honestly about some very difficult subjects so that we could benefit from their tragedy. I'd like to thank my wonderful agent, who I share with the last recipient, Tina Bennett, who's just been the most amazing believer in this story and in me, and Vanessa Mobley and the entire team at Crown, who believed in this book before it was finished and have just put so much behind it. And I'd like to thank the Book Critics Circle. I'm so honored by this, and also all of my friends and family for their support. Thanks.
evening. My name is Mark Athatakis, and it was my great privilege to serve as the chair of the NBCC Fiction Committee, which selected these 5 excellent finalists. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Americana, published by Kino. Javier Marias, The Infatuations, translated by Margaret Jewel Costa, published by Kino. Alice McDermott, Someone, published by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. Ruth Ozeki, A Tale for the Time Being, published by Viking. And Donna Tartt, The Goldfinch, published by Little Brown. And the recipient of the NBCC Award in Fiction is Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi. With Americana, which is at once a love story, an immigrant's tale, and a socially acute snapshot of this chaotic moment in time, Chimamanda Adichie nails the idiosyncrasies of 3 cultures. Like multiple NBCC Award winner Philip Roth, Adichie is audacious when writing about the immigrant experience, about love and sex, about bigotry and hate and invisibility. Americana questions the boundaries we draw between races and genders and nations. Adichie suggests obliquely that we return to the essential human encounter. She holds up a mirror and invites us to see ourselves. Congratulations.
I've listened to these very elegant speeches, and I just really didn't think I would win. And so I think all I can say is I'm just so thrilled and so grateful and just so ridiculously happy. I was thrilled to be on the shortlist and to be in such good company, particularly to be on the shortlist with a woman whose work I love, Alice McDermott, who was also my teacher in graduate school. And there's something wonderful about this prize because it's a prize that is selected by people who actually really read. And I think it's fantastic. So thank you all so much. I'm so happy. Thank you.
Congratulations to all the finalists and the winners, and thanks to everyone for coming tonight. The writers will be in the back signing books for a few minutes, and then we hope you'll join us across the street or on 13th Street for the reception. Thanks and good night.